Just starting off the session today. Thank you everyone for joining in this meetup today. So our topic for this meetup is the Universal API Management with the Anypoint Flex Gateway offering. So we too will be speaking today. Myself, Sangamitra Chatterjee. I have been 13 years of experience in integration design stack with OIC and Fusion middleware. 3+ years of relevant experience in MuleSoft, working in Salesforce for last 1.5 years almost. And I'm a MuleSoft certified integration architect. Over to you, Anusha.
Thank you, Sangamitra. Hi everyone. I'm Anusha. I have total of 10 years of experience, and pretty much whole of my experience is in integration. And coming to the MuleSoft, I've been working from almost 3.5 runtime onwards, so I would say it's around 7+ years. And I'm glad that I could get chance to explore multiple other integration tools like ETL and some of my experience into CRM as well. And currently, I'm working with Salesforce as a senior technical consultant. So this is very short about myself. So over to you, Sangamitra.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Anusha. So we have our organizers today, Ravi, who needs, I think, no introduction. Ravi, you want to add up, or maybe
No,
you
we
want
can
to?
directly jump on, okay, to the
Yeah,
topic,
Veena.
please.
Yeah, Veena Basan, thank you for organizing this and helping us to organize this meetup today and giving us a chance. Thank you very much. So let's directly jump into the agenda we have. Just there are 5 topics or 5 points of this agenda. So just an information: if anybody is having any question, they can on the fly ask or they can speak up. And if there is anything, or at the end we have a specific Q&A session for 15 minutes dedicated, or in between also we can take up interchangeably. So please feel free to ask. This session is for you only for discussing your points rather than speaking in a monotonic, or it's a monologue one. Thank you. So we have agenda of universal API management. We will be touch basing on concept and architecture of Flex Gateway, why it is on any point, why it is one of the product offering is in any point Flex Gateway. We have the features of Flex Gateway, its competitive solution, why it has been a competitive solution over other management solutions. Then the few customer use cases with Flex Gateway and comparisons of its different deployment models. Then it will be followed by a demonstration of the Anypoint Flex Gateway, how it can be installed, configured, and using as a management solution. And finally, Q&A. So next we will be totally jumping on concept, architecture, and design. So under this head, we will just talk about the objective and overview of the universal API management. So as far as the terms are self-explanatory, API management, we all know about how to manage, how to secure, or how to govern our APIs, security, observability, routing, and other features, NFRs applied on it. The term universal and flex, these two are basically, the universality applies on 3 aspects. Number one is the location of the APIs that we are being managed. So the infrastructure or the location of the APIs where it is now holding up, use, or where it will be placed now in the API management world, it is not constrained to any specific Mule runtime. Earlier, we had the concept of having Mule proxy if we want to manage or secure or govern any non-Mule application using our API manager. There was a restriction of the Mule proxy. So now, with this Flex Gateway, as part of the universal API management, this restriction of placement of API tidying up with a specific runtime or with a specific language of API, like previously we had to had only Mule API to be managed. Now both the non-Mule, any application, any API written in any language, sitting in anywhere of your distributed architecture, it can be managed via the universal API management Flex Gateway solution. That is why the flexibility has been achieved. We will talk about it more in a later slides. So Flex Gateway has got 2 management modes basically. One is the connected one, second one being the local port. So when we say connected mode, Anypoint Flex Gateway, the connection is between Anypoint Flex Gateway as a service and between the Anypoint control plane. We have 2 segregations for control plane and runtime plane in Anypoint offering, Anypoint platform offering. So the connected mode always refers to its connectivities, Flex Gateway's connectivity on the control plane. Now, when I say connectivity, the data, any metadata from the for that particular API is being managed via the API manager. That's the connected mode. It is connected to the API manager. Similarly, if it is a local mode, we can say it is a disconnected mode. If we are not at all connecting to the any point control plane via the manager, all our metadata management has to be happening manually or via some declarative configuration files, because we are not leveraging the API manager connectivity over here. Next, let's go to Flex Gateway installation options. So there are 4 different models by which Flex Gateway can be installed. One is as a Linux service, which is a standalone service sitting in any VM. Second one is as a Docker container, fitting or sitting inside any of your containerized application architecture. You can have a service mesh, you can have a microservice distributed architecture for messaging. There, it can be fit as a Docker container. Third and fourth option, whenever we are seeing, this is based on the Kubernetes cluster. If your customer is having a Kubernetes cluster where your applications, any application written in any language, any API is deployed over this Kubernetes cluster, Flix Gateway can be installed over there as an ingress controller or a load balancing service, both in Kubernetes as well as in OpenShift cluster. I think whatever we talked about just now till this 2-3 slides, you can visualize. This is just for the visualization. What are the different flavors we have? Number one is if you see from the left to right, there is a standalone mode. In the standalone mode, you can see we can there are 2 containers. I mean Docker container and the VM. We can install as a VM, Flex Gateway as a VM. We can install Flex Gateway as a Docker. In both of the cases, you can see it is managing not specifically any Mule API, but one Node.js and one Java application. You can have Python, you can have Go, you can have any other language, Spring Boot, any other language by which your API is designed or developed, and that can be managed. Middle in the next part, there is a container sidecar pattern. So if you have a distributed architecture, microservice architecture, where you need some inter-process communication, which is a very technical term in our microservice communication mode, then you can have a concept of container sidecar. So your application your application Java application, you can see in the middle, is sitting inside a Docker container, and your Flex Gateway is also sitting in a container, but it is in a sidecar. It is sitting within a pod. That's why it is termed as a container sidecar. It is going side by side of your application in a pod. Third is the third option for both OpenShift and Kubernetes. We have ingress controller, where it is just a load balancing service placed as an ingress controller or ingress service or ingress pod on top of your services deployed in Kubernetes cluster, or OpenShift cluster also can be your choice. Any question till this point? Any issues on anything? Anusha, any question came up in the chat or anything? If you can just let me know.
No, Sangamitra. I'll let you know if there is a question.
Sure, sure. Just we can handle it. Okay. So now let's think about, as in the first slide we talked about why it is universal and where is the flexibility. So both the term universal and flexibility, if you can see here, it can be identified. So suppose this is your architecture where you have a cloud hub, you have Mule API deployed in your cloud hub, you have Mule control plane, you have traditional on-premise data center at the down, and you have a multi-cloud architecture or multi-cloud implementation. Here you have AWS and Azure, where AWS and Azure, both the clouds are getting records from the traditional system. Now, if you see here, both inside your Azure and AWS, for both of these applications, we are having an associated proxy within it. I'm just hovering my mouse, an associated proxy. So if you really want to get some data from AWS cloud or in the from the Azure cloud, you have to run a proxy, or you have to create a proxy in your Mule Cloud Hub along with the Mule API. Other than that, so if your number of application grows, other than that, if you do not create a proxy over here, it is not possible within the existing Mule gateway setup to go and get the data from the AWS cloud. So this is how the proxy had happened earlier. Now, as it is a proxy application, obviously it is running inside my Mule Anypoint API runtime. It is eating up vcode. It is eating up the infrastructure. And whenever you're consumer, so this is a existing architecture with the Mule gateway that we had. What changed from the previous slide to here? So this is the one we have from the flexible Anypoint Flex gateway with the as part of the UAPI. So where it got changed, if you see the previous slide and the new slide, so the elimination has been done from the so Mule proxy has been eliminated, and instead of that, the Flex gateways are sitting now in your customer provided cloud infrastructure. So we will be running the Flex gateways in the co-location or in the same infrastructure of our provided cloud, but not within our MuleSoft. And also, if we have multiple clouds coming up, instead of writing up this proxy, we have a same single control plane where we can manage all our, as much as possible, all our cloud applications or any standalone Java, whatever applications we have, we can manage under a single pane. So this flexibility has been added from Anypoint platform towards the customer infrastructure. So I will just hover it for a few minutes. So now let's talk about few comparisons. So what is our idea about next one? Now we understand that where Flex Gateway is sitting and why we are using the Flex Gateway. Now we will be talking about its comparison. We had already another, several API management solution earlier. So why it has got into attraction or why it is useful. So Flex Gateway versus other MuleSoft offerings we had, we can categorize the API management solution in three categories. Number one is the gateway, second one is the Anypoint for service mesh, and the third one is the Flex gateway. So if we compare or if we want to propose a solution for any design aspect, let's think about five NFRs. We can broadly categorize the selection criteria in five NFRs. Number one is the architecture pattern. So in case we have already Mule APIs, which is a three-layer architecture API, properly formatted, and it's running with the Mule runtime, it is a Mule API. In that case, if you have a Cloud Hub runtime, RTA for anywhere, let's go for a Mule gateway, because our requirement will be sufficed by the Mule gateway using the auto discovery idea of the traditional API manager. Now, if the customer is already having a distributed microservice architecture and the Istio has been used as their open source message communication framework, in that case, we can also leverage Anypoint, but then we will be selecting Anypoint for service mesh as our management solution. We have this option. We will show that in our demo, that we have this option if we really want to manage the API. And the third option is the Flex Gateway, when we do not have the boundary or do not have the limitation of Mule or Istio or Java or Spring Boot, anything. Just if you have microservice written in any language, if it is a container, if it is a VM, anything can be managed via Flex Gateway. Second one coming as a deployment topology. Mule Gateway is absolutely managed by, it is MuleSoft managed. Anypoint service mesh is basically, it is totally concentrated or it is totally concentrating on Kubernetes concept or Kubernetes architecture, because the Istio framework is also made up of that, the data plane and control plane. The deployment topology for Flex Gateway is either VM or Kubernetes, because here also we are not limited to Mule or Istio tightly. It is not tightly coupled or not limited to. It can run on anywhere on any infra. Okay. Now the use cases is traditional Mule application, as we discussed. That should be with the Mule Gateway. We should have a choice of Mule Gateway. If any customer has already adopted and invested there with a service mesh implemented using Istio, let's not break that. We still can have Anypoint API as a solution on top of this service mesh. If we have neither of these two restrictions, any architecture, any microservice, any service, any Mule, if it is a combination on sprawling of APIs, let's go for the Flex Gateway. The last two NFRs, which is the IT user and Mule runtime, we can see that Mule Gateway is tied up, as we mentioned, with the Mule runtime, and it is very much tied up with the requirement of a MuleSoft developer. Whereas the service mesh as well as the Flex Gateway is a polyglot architecture. It is not running on, it is not tied up with a specific application runtime. Okay, so any question till this point, or any selection criteria that you have experienced in your project or maybe with your customer or anything?
So I think non-Mule APIs and microservices. I think Flex Gateway is good fit, right? Ideally.
Yes, in that case, just we have to check what are your few NFRs that you need to select, because just having Mule or non-Mule is should not be the criteria. What I understand. So first thing we have to understand, what is your cost now. If you really want to move your Anypoint API, your API management solution with Flex Gateway, first of all, is how much is already done, what are the views you are getting, what are the metadata you are getting with your existing management, and how much cost you really want to get involved into by using the new Flex Gateway. If it is okay to rewrite all your application in MuleSoft and then use the Mule Gateway, if you can consider this as a cost, or if you really don't want to bear the cost of rewriting and the infrastructure overloading or overusage, then we have to go for the Flex Gateway. Also, we have to make sure if we are running Flex Gateway, we have to be very much sure about our authorization, identity, and security policies. That also, one of our key feature or key NFR before selecting into the Flex Gateway. But yeah, as you mentioned, if we are have sprawling of APIs, if you are busting up with APIs, and we have several architectural systems present that we need to manage, that too in a faster and much more efficient way, obviously Flex Gateway should be your choice.
Yes, yes. So in that case, some of the Mule APIs deployable into Cloud Hub 2.0, then
Mm.
some microservices and non-Mule APIs can
Mm.
be deployed into Plex gateways, and
Yes.
they communicate very well. Then third option, if there are any deployable APIs in AWS or Azure and Google Cloud, how these Plex gateways communicate.
Yes. So you have a multi-cloud architecture. I think that's what your question, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay, so you have a system where you have some services in AWS, some services in Azure and GCP, correct? So
yes,
you can in that case, that's the tradition. If we have already a Kubernetes cluster already deployed with your any of your cloud infrastructure, as you mentioned, if you have your Kubernetes cluster deployed, let's go
Ye-
for the Flex Gateway as an ingress controller. So in your Azure Cube, on top of your existing Azure Cube cluster,
yeah.
you should configure ingress specifically for managing the Azure APIs. If you have a second set of Kubernetes cluster running on AWS, you should have a second ingress controller which is managing the traffic and routing controlling for the AWS cloud. So your ingress controller will be replicated, or ingress controller will be varied across all your varied across all your Kubernetes deployed on the cloud. But if you have an if you suppose if you do not have Kubernetes actually present within your AWS, suppose you have only Dockers running there, then you can go for the sidecar pattern also within AWS. That also can be happening.
Okay, okay. So Plex gateways are very much flexible with multi-cloud
Yes,
deployments. Then,
yes. Per cloud, if you have a cube, basically, if you have a cube per, maybe if you have cube cluster across three cloud provider, maybe GCP, maybe AWS, maybe Azure in three layers.
yeah,
So you can have three ingress controllers, and you
yes.
can have Flex Gateway across all your three. So there will be three instances, obviously, for different cloud, but you can flexibly manage that. Not a problem.
Okay, in that case, we don't need to go for RTF because almost RTF is deprecated then.
Only I think the reason we use RTF is that when you are managing your Mule application on a container-based runtime model, so for that, yeah, still RTF will be there. But here, when we are talking about non-MuleSoft application, your non-MuleSoft application is running on a non-MuleSoft runtime. So it is running on, say, AWS or GCP or Azure or any bare metal for that instance. But your Mule application is still running on your Mule runtime, and you want to manage both the things through your API gateway. So, Flex Gateway will give you the provision like you can deploy your gateway nearer to your non-MuleSoft application running on a different cloud, and from that Flex Gateway, you can, I mean, then you can, I mean, for or from a layman term, you can think that then Flex Gateway will pass on all the metadata related information to your anypoint control plane, and you can manage your non-MuleSoft APIs as well, like you are managing your MuleSoft API. So, in short, RTF will also be there because RTF has a separate purpose where you want your MuleSoft runtime work in a, you want to deploy MuleSoft on a MuleSoft runtime on a container-based architecture. So for that, RTF is there.
Yeah, I think Flex Gateways and Cloud Hub 2 is very much
Flex Gateway is
sufficient.
more for non-MuleSoft API, where I'm not running my API. I mean, I don't want to use my API. If my API is implemented on some other technology than MuleSoft and running on some other runtime, but I want to manage that API from MuleSoft. So then Flex Gateway comes into the picture. But if I have a MuleSoft API, I'm developing my API or the implementation is on MuleSoft runtime, and I want to manage that MuleSoft runtime in a Kubernetes cluster mode, then I need to go for it.
Yeah, I think we are pretty good. Sounds like we have Cloud Hub
Correct.
2.0, Flex
Yeah.
Gateways, RTF.
Correct.
So based on our use cases and business, so we can take the
Yeah.
decision.
Correct.
It's
Right.
good. Thanks, Anand.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ananda. Yeah, so basically, yeah, as Ananda rightly mentioned, um, RTF is your runtime. Flex Gateway is not basically your runtime. It is a management solution
Yes, yes,
hosted on your infra. I mean, on your cloud infra or in your on your or the customer infrastructure. It is not. I mean, it is not hampering where you are running your API. It is not a mule runtime, or it is absolutely has got nothing to do with the runtime consumption. It is just a management solution. Just you can make sure of that.
yes, yes.
It is treated as a service hosted in the customer network. Just we do not want to overload our as Ananda mentioned, we do not want to overload or anything that is on a non-mule. We do not really want to replicate a mule proxy, and we really want to do not want to overuse or overload our RTF or our cloud hub or our cloud hub 2 with that. We will just propagate, we will just offload this proxy, mule proxy, what we had earlier, from our infra, I mean, from the MuleSoft cloud infra towards the customer infra, which is very much nearer to the customers.
Yes, yes. RTF is customer infra we can install, and their Mool runtime is there. So that is for some Mool APIs we can use, but non-Mool APIs,
Yes,
these Flex gateways are very much capable. I think ultra fast. That is good.
right.
Thank you so
It
much.
is for the non-mule. Yeah, it is mostly for the non-mule. It is
Yes.
giving the flexibility for the non-mule.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
what I am
Yes.
also
Yes. As Ananda mentioned.
got it. Thank you so much.
No problem. So if it is fine, then we can go for the next ones. I think if we do not have any question, Anusha. So key feature and difference metrics, I will really go quick on that, because here basically if you see why it is different from the Mule gateway, now we will check about the components. What made up this Flex gateway? What Flex gateway is combining all of that? So we have Mule runtime. I mean, for Mule gateway, we all know that there is an embedded Mule runtime agent which talks to the API manager via a WebSocket, and that uses your API auto discovery in a traditional mode to get your policies and everything downloaded from the API manager to your runtime manager. That's the idea of your any API gateway, traditional Mule API gateway for the Mule APIs. In the Anypoint Flex Gateway, the main component for routing in application routing filtering is the envoy proxy. We will talk about the envoy proxy in a bit later. We have the deployment model: deploy anywhere, any customer hosted infra, local or connected mode, as we discussed in our previous thing, and pricing. There are few pricing considerations from the, I mean, with respect to the Mule API gateway versus the API Flex gateway, which are action based and code based. That's not our topic right now. So these are basically the few feature difference. Now coming to the functional components, what actually Flex gateway down the line is having. If you see here, Flex gateway is basically having two components. Number one is a Flex controller. Is my screen visible properly? Are you able to see the notations?
Yes.
Just confirm me. Okay. Yeah. So we have a Flex controller, we have an envoy proxy, we have a fluent bit in the down of this, the down square, if you see. So runtime manager, client, and policy engine, these are the two parts of the Flex controller. These are nothing but the controlling part. These are the controlling agent of the Mule Flex Gateway runtime. Whenever you create a Flex Gateway service, These are the agents. These acts as an agent from your run Flex Gateway runtime service. The second component is the envoy proxy. This is basically the heart of the routing, and it's the cause of the speed and filtering and speed of the this Flex Gateway routing mechanism for the incoming request. So any consumer application, when it sends a request, if you see the arrow mark I'm just highlighting, so any consumer application, suppose we have a Flex Gateway runtime already deployed, and on top we have the MuleSoft hosted control plane with all the features, monitoring, API manager, runtime manager, UMP deploy. So how it works basically? So the consumer application comes, the request comes, and it hits the envoy proxy. Now, what is the envoy proxy? Envoy proxy is nothing but a open source software load balancing application, same as Nginx or HA proxy. If anybody has the concept of it, we term it as L3, L7, and L4 service. It has got the capability of TLS termination, HTTP routing, or filtering of services or payloads. So this is a CNCF, I mean cloud native application framework, open source. So it the request comes into the envoy proxy, then it starts checking what are the policies applied on this particular API. You have deployed the API, you have registered the API with Anypoint Flex Gateway. So what it does, it makes a call to the rest to the API manager. If you can see, I'm just following through. It is a one-way WebSocket call or HTTP call to 443 for getting the policies or downloading the policies. It applies the policies on top of that API, and then finally, based on once the policies are all validated, the request is passed or the messages are passed to the n number of APIs, the actual implementation API in the backend service, which is number two. There are two more points you can see here why these communications are happening. So this is basically a controller agent. This creates a controlling communication between Anypoint Flex Gateway and the Anypoint control plane communication. So runtime manager client basically manages a two-way MTLS communicate secure with socket MTLS communication. This is a both-way communication we have with the UMP deployed. I will come to the UMP deployed, what it does. And there is a policy engine. What is the task of this policy engine? This policy engine is basically updating or fetching the details, any updates or any changes of policies in the from the runtime manager of hosted control plane. This is also again a secure communication happening between these two. So you can think of this as a control plane of the Flex Gateway, and this is basically the data plane of the Flex Gateway. This manages the routing, this manages this part, this controller manages the agent type communication. This can work as an agent between the Anypoint control plane and the Flex Gateway runtime. Okay. And the third component, if you see here, this is a fluent bit. This is very much important. Why it is happening is fluent bit is again an open source component for accepting, managing, and routing metadata or logs or application related matrices generated. So what it does is any request comes, whatever request, your filtration and other information it is coming in the envoy proxy inside the Flex Gateway. FluentBit, this component sitting in as part of the Flex Gateway, manages and send this metadata to Anypoint monitoring, where you can see all your metadata, application API metadata into the monitoring. So this is the, or you can also export it into a third-party logging system, maybe Splunk, maybe Relic, anything, whatever is permissible or whatever is acceptable. So this is the communication between Anypoint Flex Gateway and the control plane so that we can monitor all our APIs. This is the responsibility of FluentBit. So these are basically the components we have for the Flex Gateway. Any question on this component slide, or we can directly move into the rest? I think if we do not have anything, yeah, Anusha, can you please take this up? Maybe
Yeah.
the deployment pattern and design. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, yeah, to summarize, we have seen. Can you go one slide, previous one? Yeah. So, I just want to summarize like what we have seen until now. So, we have seen overview of what the Flex Gateway is doing, what are the connection modes available, different, what how we can have the Flex Gateway deployed when we are managing it using the Flex Gateway, like the different management solutions, like in a standalone mode or in ingress mode. So there are different modes that we can operate. The previous architecture, like before MuleSoft have introduced the universal Flex Gateway, how we used to design our applications versus how it is designed currently, that is what we have seen. And also an architectural overview of the Flux Gateway was covered as part of this. Now, so when we are taking up Flux Gateway as our management solution, we can design it based on the requirement or the use cases that our client requests us. So I'll take you through like the most commonly observed, or probably it all depends. So these two variations are few which we can just walk through on high level and probably follow up with the discussion on the demo. Sangamitra, next slide,
Yeah.
please. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first one, if you see here, so whatever we are talking here, the variations, it is only in the connected mode. So if you can see here, the Flux Gateway is in connected mode. And you can see there are multiple services, like multiple APIs written in different languages. Like it is written on the there are Mule APIs, there are Spring Boot APIs, there are APIs written over Node.js and the .NET as well. And also one critical observation I want to highlight here is all the different applications are sitting in different ports. If you can see, Mule APIs are on 9002, Spring APIs are on 9003, Node.js are on 9004, and so on. So what it clearly shows is we from the Flex Gateway we are connecting to the non-Mule APIs which are sitting in different containers and different ports. So what does that mean indirectly is we are opening up the port in the Flux Gateway. What are those ports? 9002, 9003, 9004, and 9005. So basically, whatever services we wanted to connect over the ports, those ports are being opened up. So basically, I I would just summarize this particular part as we are connecting or we are managing the APIs or non-mule APIs which are containerized by opening up the ports. So this is called as port based routing, which is one of the option that we can implement. Any questions on this? Okay, I would take it as no. And going to the next part. So here, this is one other variation where you can see like there are multiple instances of Flex Gateway still in a connected mode, but there are multiple instances. Okay, so let's discuss about what is the purpose of having multiple Flex Gateways. Now, I would explain this with a use case. Let's say that my client is from banking domain. Now they have different business use cases at different business level, right? Let's say I have LOB, which is a commercial banking. I have a retail banking. I have loans, lending. So there are different business units in a banking domain, right? And I have a strict guideline at organization level that for each LOB, the business or should be different. So if that is the case, definitely my business org will be different, and I would rather prefer going for a different Flex Gateway per business unit. And that's what you could see here. So you can see four instances of Flex Gateway up and running at different LOBs, and they are connecting via, you can consider it as port, or maybe there is one more other way, like you can route as path based, which we will discuss later on. But you can still see that there are multiple Flex gateways spinned up to connect to your non-Mule API sitting in the container. So this is, I mean, the limitation, it is not just limited to these two variations. So you can have the Flex gateway install, or probably you can have it as your management solution in different ways based on your organization request or probably the mode of operation. So this is one such way that we just want to discuss it among our presentation. Moving to the next slide. Yeah. So quickly jumping into the demonstration. So we have divided today's demonstration into three parts. The part one is installation of Flex Gateway in a standalone mode, and probably we can also manage that API, the sample API using our API manager. That is part one. The part two is the second variation or maybe the deployment model, installation of this Flex Gateway on a Kubernetes environment. Consider it as an AWS or EKS, whoever the provider is, but the steps still stand same. But we are going to demo using AWS EKS and managing it. And the part three is some detailed overview of logging, monitoring for the Flex Gateway, with a demo of sample application of out of box policies that we have in API Manager, and our touch base on options like how do we auto scale and how do we spin up the next replica if we want to, next replica of Flex Gateway. So these are on high level, or the parts that we wanted to demonstrate for today's meetup. So Sangamitra, I'll take it.
Yeah, I think I will just exit. I will stop sharing. You can start, please.
Yes. I hope you can see the screen now.
Yes, you can see.
Yeah. So as I said, the part one is about installing the Flex Gateway in a standalone mode. So what does standalone mode means? It is a VM, whether it is your own laptop, which is a physical machine, or maybe a cloud machine. Now today I am going to install the Flex Gateway in a cloud machine, which is an EC2 instance. So you can see this is an AWS. I've already logged in, and probably you can navigate to EC2 service. You can click on the launch instance. Then you will be given with the options. So probably you can say Flex Vizag demo, and you can select what type of machine you want. Is it Amazon Linux, Mac OS? So different types of machines you have. So I'm going to use today for as Ubuntu. And under this you can see the machine type and what is the architecture behind it. So it's always better before you select this, the machine type, it's better to go through the MuleSoft documentation and understand which machines are supported. So currently long term support machines are all supported, and the architecture of them should be cloud native. It should be like 64-bit cross 86. ARM is not supported. So I just want to highlight this while we are doing this. So you can select all of this machine architecture, etc., and the type of machine, whether you want it to be a T2 micro or whatever it is. So I'm just selecting as part of my eligible free tier, and you can create a new key pair if you want, or if you already have the existing one you can do this. So I'll go with creating a new key pair. I can select the key pair type as RSA, and the private key file format is .pem, and you can click as create key pair. So that will automatically download your .pem file in your folder, which will be used for connecting to the EC2 instance. So now we are done. We can select the existing group if you already have the existing security group, or else you can always go with the default option of creating a security group. If you want to allow the SSH traffic, if you want to allow the HTTPS traffic, if you want to allow the HTTP, you can select all the options that you wanted to, and also number of computing storage GPUs you want to. You can select. I'm going with all the default options, and I'm allowing all of the HTTPS and HTTP along with SSH traffic here. So once you have configured all of the required settings, you can click on the launch instance. So it will take a minute. Yeah. You can click on view all instances just to check. You can see the instance state here as still pending, and you can find all of those details like what is the instance type, availability zone, which availability zone the instance is pinned up, what is the public URL when I have to access this EC2 instance, everything as part of this details, and what is the key, security group, everything. You can see all of those details. And now the status of this instance is running. Now let me just refresh this. So this is the details part where you can see in detail, like we have configured few and few are by default created, and you have an option of connecting to that instance. So if you click on the connect, you will be able to connect using different options. Now I'm using the SSH option. So you can see the steps are very clear here. We have to open an SSH client, connect using the private key or the .pem file that was created, given change the access of that particular .pem file to read only, and then connect to the instance using this. So I'm opening the terminal. My .pem file is in downloads, and I am copying this. So where I'm giving the read only access to that particular file for the owner. And finally, the last one where we are connecting using that .pem file to this instance. So you can just click on copy here, and just a second.
Maybe you can enlarge the terminal a bit, Anusha.
Yeah. Yes, yes,
That
yes.
will be, I think, the visibility will be good. Then.
Yeah, sorry for that. So I hope it is fine now. So I'm just copying that for connecting to that instance. And we should get an error now. I would tell the reason. So now going back to the instances, I said there is a security group associated for it. So you can see the security group that got created. You can click here and you can see what all inbound rules are available for accessing this instance. So you can see it is HTTP, yes, but now we are using the SSH, right? So, but that was not enabled as part of inbound rules. So ideally we should get an error now. Yeah, you can see here, right? Connect SSH connect to this particular host, operation timed out. Now we are going back, adding a rule so that we enable the SSH traffic. SSH, yeah,
Yes.
22, and we have to give our public IP, the machine's public IP. So for that, let me check my. So this is my public IP of this machine. So I'm just giving access to my public IP, and you have to provide a CADR block. So you can save the rules now, and you can see the inbound rule got saved, and you can retry the previous SSH command. Now you can see it is getting the fingerprint using the .pem file. You can just type yes. Yes. Now we got connected to the EC2 instance, which is of Ubuntu type. So once this is done, you can log into your Anypoint Studio where you want to register the Flex Gateway. So you can go to Flex Gateway option, add a Flex Gateway. Now my environment or OS is of type Linux, and my machine is Ubuntu. So you can select this, and you have the steps documented here. So the first one here is you are just getting your public key, and you're downloading the Flex Gateway packages and installing that particular package to Ubuntu service. So this is in detail of what this command does. So I'm just copying that and I'm running this here. Yeah, the installation and setup is pretty much straightforward when it comes to the VM service or the standalone model. Yeah, you can see the first command execution have completed where we have downloaded the packages and also we have installed to our Ubuntu machine. The next one is registering with our platform. This is the second command. So I'll just rename this particular part. So I just gave the gateway name just as a reference. And you can see we are registering it using the auth token and pretty much is known. So I'm just running this particular command. So this will basically registers the Flex Gateway against the Anypoint platform. So the authorization, the certificates, etc., everything was provided, and it will get connected. So you can see here the registration has completed, and also it creates a directory of configuration file in the Ubuntu machine with the conf.d, which will have all of the details that is required for connecting to the Anypoint platform. Now, the next step is starting our gateway. So you can just copy it, paste it here. So this will start the Flex Gateway as a service. Now, how do we know if the service have started and it is up and running? Is the last command, which is systemctl list units Flex Gateway. Yeah, you can see here Flex Gateway dot service. It is active and it is running. So now, if I go back, ideally, I should see Vizag Meetup Flux connected, and inside this one replica is spinning up. So any questions as part of this installation process?
No, I do not think I have it on the chat.
Okay, okay, fine. Now, once our installation is done, I would like to just give an overview or brief of use case that we wanted to demo. So I've just drafted it. So consider that this is the any point where we have all of our control plane, options like monitoring policies, logging, security, usage metrics, everything except in the control plane. And this box is our organization's own network. And let's say, for example, I have an AWS infrastructure, and inside the AWS infrastructure, I have a Kubernetes service that is hosting all of my APIs, irrespective of languages, like whether they are Spring Boot, whether they are Java, whether they are Mule APIs that are hosted on RTF or on-premise, just the standalone servers, whatever, right? So all of them are hosted uh, over the EKS. Okay. Now, this is the Flex Gateway service that is running in another availability region, and my EKS or the EKS is available in the another availability region AR2. This is AR1 and this is AR2. Okay, so what is our Flex Gateway? It is EC2 instance with Ubuntu VM. And EKS has multiple different variations of APIs. Now, this is my consumer application, which is sitting in my own organization network. So once the consumer application makes a call to the Flex Gateway, so this will be like this. I'll tell you what this downstream downstream URL and upstream URL is. Once the consumer application makes a call to the Flex Gateway using the downstream URL, the Flex Gateway does all the required, like let's say for example, it downloads the policies, everything, because it is all connected to the Anypoint platform, right? This is the link where it will connect or talk to platform, get all the policies downloaded, and then it will make a call to the upstream URL, which is the actual implementation URL. Now, what is downstream and upstream? I'll showcase it as part of our demo, but downstream URL is your Flux gateway. Like let's say the Flux gateway is hosted on the EC2 instance, so the public IP of EC2 instance will be my downstream URL. Let's say I have hosted Flex Gateway on an Ingress controller, then the public API, public IP of that, cloud or Kubernetes service will be the downstream URL. Now, what is the upstream URL? The actual implementation URL. Let's say my API is deployed in the Cloud Hub 2 or Cloud Hub 1. Then we have a cloudhub.io implementation URL that will be my upstream URL. Let's say here in my case, my API, still a Mule API, is hosted on an RTF, which is on EKS. So my upstream URL is my implementation URL with the domain name and the endpoint, the actual implementation. So this is the downstream and upstream URL, which I have given here. So currently the Flex Gateway is installed here. We have to do the management of this API using the Flex Gateway, which I'll be demoing right now. Any questions? Okay, moving forward, now this is installed. So I'll go to API manager, or probably I wanted to add an API so that I could manage, right? So I can go to APIs, add API. I want to use the Flex Gateway, and I'll select the Flex Gateway that we have created, Vizag Meetup Flex.
Yeah, I would just like to highlight a point, Anusha, just if you can
Yeah,
see here for all of them. So there are three options we talked about, right? Mule Gateway, Service Mesh, and Flex Gateway. So you can either use Mule Gateway for your API management solution, Anypoint Service Mesh, Service Mesh for your API management, or Flex Gateway. So we had, if you remember one slide we had for the competitive analysis. So you can deploy or you can control your API via any of the three runtimes: Mule Gateway, Flex Gateway, or Service Mesh. Here is the one. Here is the point where you have to select it. Yeah, please, Anusha,
yeah.
go ahead.
So I'll be selecting my Flex Gateway. Click on next, and you will be having an option of selecting it from Exchange or creating a new API. As my API is hosted in RTF, so I'm going ahead and creating a new API. I'm creating test while API. Okay, and the asset type is HTTP API, and you can click on next. Yeah, so I was talking, I gave a brief introduction or detail about this downstream URL, right? So this is where we configure our downstream URL. So you can enable the protocol HTTP or HTTPS. You can enable the port that you want to hit. Here I'm enabling the over 80, and I'm not giving any base path. I'm just going with the default, which is just the slash. So this is the configuration of downstream URL. And when I click next, this is the configuration of the upstream URL, which is my implementation URL. So let me take my implementation URL. But before even giving it here, I just want to hit it and show that this is already up and running in my AWS infrastructure, which is giving me this response. Okay. Yeah. So here I configure the upstream URL and then you can click on next. You can just review, click on save and next, save and deploy. Yeah. Now we can see this particular API is active and we will try to hit the downstream URL. Now, what is our downstream URL? We will have to check the EC2 uh, public IP. You can go to instances, the instance that you created, and you will have your public IP here. So you can use either Postman. Let me go to the Postman directly. And you can try hitting this. So you can see the response have come. Now I'm hitting the EC2 instance, which is actually hosting the Flex gateway, and the Flex gateway is routing it to the implementation, direct implementation URL, wherever you have hosted your API. So this is on high level how it works. And also you can see in the response headers, you will get some default. The next thing is the management.
Yeah, Anusha, one quick check. Can you please go to the response header once? Then I would like to highlight the audience one point also. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to make sure that you are hitting via the Flex gateway, you can see a header X envoy upstream service time. Okay. So this is basically a pointer or an identifier or a header element. If you get that in the response, so it is hitting your via or managed via your Flex gateway, which is internally talking to envoy proxy. Just a pointer for all of you. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So, as we were talking from starting, this is a management solution. So, let's see apply one of the out of box policies considering the interest of time. So, I'm directly moving to the policies. So, you can see there's no policy added. So, I'm adding a policy, and let's take the simplest one, the rate limiting, and you can just click on that. We can give the configurations. I'm going with 10, time period of 1, and time unit of 1 minute. So 10 requests per 1 minute. And also I'm enabling the rate limiting headers here so that I can see like how many requests are still available for us, and click on apply. Yeah, this should be applied by now. Let's see if we are getting those headers or not. I'm hitting the same. But now you can see there are rate limiting headers that have been added, and you can see the request count has been reduced by 1. So let me hit continuously and show the body as well. So we're getting this. Let me request for 6 more times. So we are left with only 1. And for this, we have got this also, the response. I'm hitting again. Now it is 0. So this time, now when I'm hitting it, I should get a 429 too many requests. So you can see the policy is in effect and it is working. And in this way, we managed. It's not just about the policies. You can also create the alerts, identify the logs, have the contracts, many more. Like whatever the functionalities that we support from the control plane, everything can be done for by using the Flex gateway as well. So with this, I end my demo. Probably Sangamitra will give you a quick overview of how it is seen in the Kubernetes environment. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you, Anusha. Thank you. That was a really good video. I will just stop my video. I will start sharing my screen. So I won't take much time because many of the steps are almost similar. So just let me know if you can see my screen, if everybody. Is it all right if you can see it?
Yeah, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, so I will just go through because the installation steps are almost similar. So here, for our demo, we will be needing one EKS service. So demonstration is first we will be creating one EKS cluster. So how a cluster has to be created?
Sangamitra, sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt.
yeah,
You
yeah, go
can
ahead, please.
maximize your screen, probably.
Okay, good, doing good.
I can see some AnyPoint Studio at the back end.
Okay. Is it a problem for all of you or?
Now it is fine.
Is it
Yes.
fine now? I think it's a bit
Yeah.
slow. Okay, so if you really want to go, so first thing what we have to do for the Flex Gateway on EKS cluster, so we are choosing AWS cluster for our consideration and implementation today. So if we do not have a cluster, we always consider customer will be having an EKS cluster with you. If you do not have, so these are the few steps we need to follow for our EKS cluster installation. I'm not going to go into the details of the EKS cluster creation. So whenever you create an EKS cluster, let's go through the overall steps. Um, just a second. You open your AWS EKS Kubernetes cluster. When you configure the cluster, you give a cluster name. You create a cluster service role if you are really want to go for a fresh cluster setup. Then after that, you select the AWS service trusted entity type, which AWS service you really want to go for. For us, it will be an EKS cluster, EKS and cluster. Then select a cluster role, EKS cluster role, to allow access other EKS services. So these are basically the infrastructure steps that we want to create before a cluster is completely deployable. So this is my cluster configuration. I have a cluster name, suppose EKS cluster, some some random name with a specific cluster role added. We have specific documentation for that. Then you have to configure the several components of the cluster. Number one is the networking. For now, you can take the default. We have three subnets as a VPC and three subnets over there. Then after that, your cluster will be available and running. If you deploy the cluster, yeah, any question, any pause?
No, no.
Okay.
Proceed.
Okay. So once you create and just make a deploy the cluster, your EKS cluster, either in Azure or AWS, will be available. It will take some time, so I will just keep this demonstration part. Okay. So once the cluster is up and running, your cluster will be not having any resources associated with it if you are readily, I mean, if you are creating it freshly. I'm sorry, any compute instances will not be available for a freshly created cluster. Once you create a fresh cluster, let's please consider that you have to add up specific nodes to it so that your cluster is absolutely formed up. So how you can do that, you can create any number of nodes. You can create 2 3 4, any number of nodes associated with the cluster, just for the clustering, I mean EKS cluster to run. You first, we have to create a node group. Then inside the node group, you have to select a particular instance type, and then you can create the node. It can be EC2 anything, it can be EC2 AWS or anything, any image that you want to spin up as a node. So once you have the cluster ready, then you add the compute to the cluster, as many number of nodes you really want to go for it. For me, like, I have created a node group where I have T3 instance type large for both of two instances. So my EKS cluster, I mean, once you create it, your EKS cluster will be now ready with two member nodes within it. So if you see these two, whatever you already created, now we will be ready with our cluster deployment. So EKS is already available. So we will consider, for the sake of time, our EKS is already available. Then we are going to deploy the Flex gateway on top of this EKS. Now how we will do that? Let's go to the API manager. The same step, first we have to register, then we have to deploy. Always remember installation, registration, and deployment of the gateway. Let's go ahead with that. Suppose I want to create a new gateway on this already created EKS. Just for the sake of time, my EKS is Flex Gateway Demo EKS cluster. This is the one, not the V1. This is the one I will be using, and I will consider this is my cluster where I have to run my Flex gateway. Okay. So I will go to the add Flex gateway, then I will go to the Kubernetes because I have a kube cluster. I will, okay. Let's go for it. I already have a directory present, which is called, okay, this is the Vizag Meetup demo directory. Let's see. Okay, first I will pull the Flex Gateway image. So my Flex Gateway latest image is available now. If I open up the Docker, you will see the Flex Gateway latest image is already available. Okay. Yeah. Now we will go to the registration part of my gateway. Now, how will it work? Let's go to the registration. How I'm going to register it. So if you see here, there are few things you can customize over here. Here I have to put the gateway name, as Anusha mentioned, same steps, Vizag, EKS, Flex gateway. Okay, that's my gateway. I have to register. Okay, so I will in the same location. Okay, this is starting the registration. My registration is completed. We will take a few quick check on why this and how it is looking like. So this is my Vizag Meetup demo I already created. If you can see, if you cannot see my screen, just let me know. See, this is the Vizag Meetup demo of 1517. Okay. Let's see what registration demo got, a registration tagging got created. Here, this is the actual entry point, as Anusha mentioned, of the connected mode. I mean, it is the connection to the control plane. Why and how? If you go into the registration, always make sure you have to have an agent ID. How to read it? You have to have one agent ID that is responsible for your Flex gateway connected towards your AnyPoint control plane. You have the asset name, whatever you have given as a Flex gateway ID, just now I gave. You have the metering schema ID just for your logging and metering metadata, the logging monitoring metadata. You have this logging endpoint enabled. If you see here, this is the MuleSoft Cloud Hub logging endpoint. Logging, metering, and monitoring, 3 API endpoints are available over here. This is for your registration. This is after you register, all these three are enabled. This is a Flex Gateway registration, and this is the TLS certificate and key. As Anusha mentioned, this is the authorization for connecting towards the Flex Gateway. This is how your registration YAML should be read. So let's go. First things first. Okay, we will now go to our registration is completed. Now, once my registration is completed, how we will make sure the registration is completed? After my registration is completed, you see, my gateway got created. Whatever I name, my gateway got created just for the registration file with the target ID, but it is in the disconnected mode. It is not yet deployed. How to make sure it is deployed? How to enable the replica? We have to now go for the deployment. Okay, let's clear it. This is the Helm repo. Okay, this is a Helm repo. Helm is nothing but it is a mechanism, or it is an infrastructure by which we manage complex Kubernetes cluster resources via the usage of chart. We will cover it in some later sessions if we have time. So just consider, just for Helm for the time being, you consider you manage Kubernetes cluster resources via Helm chart. Okay. Now then what you do is you added this Kubernetes component in the Helm chart. Now we will be using this Helm chart for our deployment. Deploy and connect the gateway. Still my gateway is in disconnected mode, if you remember. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, is my screen visible? I think I am going in the last. Okay. So here, if you can see, this is my Helm command. I have a gateway. I have to create a namespace. Here is my namespace. There is a command. Suppose I need to go for Vizag demo Flex gateway 14. Okay, or maybe ingress demo Flex 14. Okay, this is my ingress namespace. I am having the registration file that is pointing up in the same location because I will be using this same registration YAML for my deployment. So what I'm going to do, see, just read this command out. I am creating a namespace. Okay, I'm creating gateway namespace, and there I'm creating one ingress. I'm giving some name where this name is getting reflected. I will just show it. I'm giving some ingress, then Flex Gateway like that, what we had in our Helm repo. Mode is connected, registration YAML is the same one that we already created in the same location. Let's see how it is getting created. We have to wait for 2 minutes. It is now getting deployed. You remember, still now my Flex Gateway is in disconnected mode. It is not at all how the connection will happen. If something spawned up in the AWS layer or in the AKS layer, then it will be in connected mode. Okay, deploy done. My namespace is gateway, status is deployed. Good. We will go here. This is my Flex Gateway cluster. I think I will reduce it a bit. Flex Gateway will be treated in AKS or EKS or any cloud provider as a resource. Here, whatever you configured is nothing but, if you analyze the command over here, whatever you created one ingress component under the namespace gateway using the registration YAML you created in a connected mode on top of the Flex Gateway. If you have any question, just let me know if you understand the installation part properly. So you have any question, Anusha? Anything coming up?
No, Samani.
Not yet. Okay. So what you created, if you see here, I am staying, as I mentioned, this will be my cluster, what I created. Under this cluster, we have multiple resources. So what I had actually, if you see in any standard Kubernetes cluster, be it in AKS, Azure, whatever, or EKS, you have specific namespaces because it already has a concept of worker node and controller node. So you have the gateway namespace. Under this gateway namespace, all your ingresses will be tied up. What is ingress? Ingress is nothing but a service type which will be sitting on top of your kube cluster as a load balancer. So if you remember, ingress Vizag demo, is this the same name I have given? Ingress Vizag demo flex 14. It should sit now inside my gateway. I mean, under my gateway namespace. Is it sitting here? Yes, it is. It is sitting here. So whenever you are checking, if you are given a scenario that you need to see the where actually your Flex Gateway is tied up, always go under the gateway. Just check how you have deployed the gateway. Generally, we do deploy it under the namespace. Under the namespace, it will come as a pod. Under the pod, there are containers. Inside the container, you have a Flex Gateway. If you think about this demonstration, this slide, this is a pod. Inside the pod, you have service, you have Flex Gateway. So inside the pod, this is also again inside the pod, you have a container. This container, what is this container having? This container is having your Flex Gateway as a service. See, it is Flex Gateway as an image. And basically that is controlled via this replica set. Any ingress is controlled via replica set, which is common across all Kubernetes concept. The concept of replica and other services are same. Okay, here. So always go to the resources, check services and networking, go services and endpoint ingresses you will be seeing here. Okay, all your under the service and networking, you check your gateways, pods and everything. Just I will check it here. Yeah. Under the all namespace, under the service and networking, you have this service also ready. This service is nothing but a pod service. Okay. Now, as I already claimed, this is okay. How I can validate my claim? Okay, we will see how. Okay, why it is not coming? Let me see what I got created. What got created? This is under the namespace gateway. Okay, I had these ingresses created. See, if I try to get the pods already got created under this command, you are seeing just now it got created whatever I generated out of this particular Flex Gateway. So my Flex Gateway is controlled via this ingress. To be a bit more, to understand something in bit more, I will try to access some services. So these are all Kubernetes concept. Okay, Kubernetes kubectl command. So the previous command, one second, the previous command will give you the number of pods it's running. As much as replica, I mean, as much as deployment you do, as much as time you deploy this Helm thing, you will be creating one ingresses. Okay. So for us, whatever, I mean, we got this pod. If we really want to get the services out of the pod, if you see here, the difference is we got the name of the service. This is a service of type load balancer under the cluster IP, this, and this is my external IP. Now, when Anusha mentioned that you have to have one external IP, this is basically my load balancing service by which it will be sitting in the downstream service by which you have to call your Flex application managed by the Flex gateway. This is your IP, and these are the ports open by default, 80 and 443. Previously, Anusha opened some port on SSH. For EKS, 80 and 443 is your by default port that's are opened. Okay. So I hope this is the registration now. As I already claimed that the registration has happened successfully, I really want to show you. So whenever you are searching any gateway, there are connected, disconnected, deleting, deleted mode. If you delete any Flex gateway, it will stay for 7 days in this console, and then it will be deleted. Either it can be connected if it is deployed, disconnected if it is not deployed but configured. Deleting means in progress deletion, deleted means already disconnected. Okay, so let's see whether my things got connected. Okay, yes, whatever I claimed is absolutely fine. Okay, is it okay? Why I should and how I should make sure, because this replica name 764DD, the same replica you should be seeing here. 1 second. This is how you should validate. Okay, 764DD, the same replica. So I think somebody asked the question initially that difference of runtime, difference of replica, and what we are doing here. We are not creating anything. Whatever creation is happening here itself, but here is just the pointer or just the notification that we are managing this replica which is present in our cluster. This should be same under the same name. Okay. So this is how your installation should happen. Now, for the sake of the time, I am just going into one already configured API that I had. 1 second. Just a minute. I am trying to now, we already configured this one. I have already deployed one API. I really do not want to go into details more. I think we are already overshooting. But anyways, so this is one, as I mentioned, Flex Gateway Demo EKS cluster is the one already I have created. As Anusha mentioned, the same step will be followed up. If you really want to deploy one API, select it and deploy select that particular Flex Gateway instance you want to get it deployed, and then create the deployment in the same way. The previously, it will be the same process. Now, what I have is, I have a sample API over here. What my sample API is doing? Nothing. Actually, it is having two flows. Okay, I will just demonstrate what is doing actually. It is just logging, and it is just giving you the response. What is the response? Successful response with my query params and with my listener path, nothing else. But I have, remember, I have two flows over here. Why I am having two flows, I will explain. So let's see, I have deployed this API. I have control, I am trying to control this API, and this API is deployed over my target runtime. Okay, let's see what is there in this API. So whenever you configure the API, the configuration of downstream and upstream concept is same. This is my 80 port. Why I have chosen this 80, not 8081? Because I do not have my port open 80 over here. Sorry, 8081 over here. If I go ahead and do 8081 here on top of any of the EKs present now, it won't work. Whatever ports are open by default, you have to make sure your Flex gateway is listening to that port only, as Anusha has mentioned. Okay, this is a simple API. We have a base path. I have just given the base path. Now we have upstreams. Okay, upstream is basically our actual implementation API. So why I am having two upstream APIs over here, I will come to the point. Now let's see. I am having this application, sample IMPL Flex Gateway application API. This is deployed, and this API I really want to manage via Flex Gateway. Okay, this is basically my endpoint. Okay, in this endpoint, what I am having, suppose I want to hit this first flow, API IMPL sample app 1. Okay, API IMPL sample app 1 or 2. Okay, just a second. Yeah. So I have, suppose this is my source system. I am sending one case demo Vizag. You can do anything out of it. Okay. Successful response received from EKS demo. This is my implementation API. So what is the implementation API or the upstream API? We can say upstream API is nothing but the service API where your service is actually running. So this is my service. I'm good to go with my service. I received from EKS demo Vizag. This is my source system, what I got. This is my listener API. And then finally with the request, this is the request URL we have sent. Now, I need to manage this via one Flex gateway already deployed or installed on EKS. So I will be managing this via one separate one. 1 second. This is just for my demonstration purpose. So A4BD, this is the one we will be using for our demonstration. Okay. Is it okay if I just overshoot for 10 more minutes, guys, or like, hello?
Yeah, it's fine, Sun.
It is fine. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So Flex on EKS is my path present in the Flex gateway configuration. Then API, IMPL, sample V1, sample app, and V1. API IMPL is my listener path endpoint over here. API IMPL sample application 1 and then star. So API IMPL sample application 1 V1 will be as is. Before that, what we have to set, we have to ensure, we have to prepare the downstream. How we will prepare the downstream? We will first fetch up, what is the external IP, then port. Okay, we will go to the external, just a second. We will go to the external IP first. Okay, this is my external IP. I pasted it. Okay, this I'm accessible. My Flex is accessible over here, and this is the port. So once, and this is my base path. So once these are all available, suppose I hit EKS demo Vizag 1111. Okay, I'm trying to hit it. Good, I got it. Sample response received from EKS 1111 from listener this with request API this. Now, how to make sure that I have hit this via the Flex gateway? If you remember, okay, this is the quickest part. If you remember, just make sure you have the headers checked up. Okay, to make sure whether you have it hit properly via the Flex gateway. Okay, this is number one. Number two is, if you remember, Anusha mentioned some few concepts of path-based and port-based routing. Suppose we have two flows. Okay, just now we talked about one sample flow with endpoint what? API sample application 1. Suppose we really want to use the same Flex gateway to ensure that I can route the request to any other application which is having an API sample application 2. This is my endpoint. And I really don't want to create a new Flex gateway out of it just for sending a request to a separate listener. Then what I'm going to do? Then we will go for the concept of the path-based routing. Why we are making the path-based routing? Because my target is same here. My application will be deployed in again with my Mule, and then it is just the difference in the path that we are going to hit, and there is no need of creating a new Flex gateway for that. We have to route it. We have to make it route that, okay, if requests come on the first listener, it will call this flow. If the request come on the second listener, it will be executing the second flow. Where this routing will be happening? This routing will be, that is why the Flex gateway is here. This routing is happening in the gateway. Where from? If you see here, there are options of selecting multiple upstream over here. Okay, multiple upstream means multiple implementation or multiple service endpoints. Your service implementation. So for me, what I have done is, there are two. For me, it will be two flows in a same application. For you, it can be two different applications altogether. Okay, for me, I have chosen two paths or two routes. Sample app 1, which is basically a sample flow 1, sample app 2, which is basically sample flow 2. You can put a label as much as possible. How many? This is basically selecting your number of services you want to make it route to. Okay, you can add up 10 upstreams for any particular API. That's the limitation. 10 APIs, or that is we are working on that, how to make it increase. Okay, now as you are having more than one upstream, if you have one upstream, there is no problem of selecting or routing. As Anusha mentioned, it is a straightforward routing. If you have more than one API, then how you have to have some logic implemented to make sure you are hitting properly. So there the concepts of routes comes. So route is nothing but basically your rule or your routing rule based on which your upstream services will be called. Okay, so for me, first you list out what are the upstreams you are trying to manage. Basically, suppose I want to manage two upstreams for the two flows. Good. Okay, so after that I would, now here what I have done is I have given two rules. What are the rules? If my path is coming, is my, if my request path is having this structure or this regex pattern, then go to this upstream service, which is nothing but the sample API v1. If my path does not follow that, then if my path has a condition of sample application 2, then go to sample application 2 or route it to sample application 2. Remember, this is a regex expression. It can accept a regex expression. Okay. So based, if it doesn't fall into any of these, then it will be defaulted as a 404. If it doesn't fall into any of this. Again, for each of the API, you can have 10 routes to be added. Okay, 10 upstreams per upstream, 10 routes to be added. Okay, this is basically the conditional routing, path based routing, where you are selecting your regex path based on which application endpoint it is going to hit. For me, we have two endpoints. Okay, I have sample application v1, I have a EKS demo 1111. Now I will go here, I will go to sample application 2 v2, I will go with 2222. Okay, this is my, let's hit it. Good. What it got? Okay, successful response from this source with a listener endpoint. This, see, the listener endpoint is now changed over here. Okay, the listener endpoint is now pointing to this flow. It is being routed via this flow with the request URI like this. Okay, this is where your path-based routing comes into picture. If you really want to manage multiple upstream, where you can manage is, I will tell you one scenario. Suppose you have to create one scenario where you have to manage a fallback API. Suppose your API is, sometimes it gets down, or some NFRs are not appropriate, and you really do not want to have any any longer downtime. So what you can do is, in that case, suppose if any timeouts or anything, if you really want to create any backup service, then this type of fallback API or multiple upstreams can be a choice. And also, anyways, if you have any path-based routing, if you really want to manage multiple service where the patterns of the path can be managed via regex, then single flex gateway with path-based routing can be your good choice. I think I covered most of the things. So the last thing we talked about, this is how your deployment actually works. The last thing I would talk about is your logging. The security policies and everything, what Anusha mentioned, it will be on in the similar pattern. There are few things we need to check about the logs. For the log pattern, there are basically, for the, one second, for the monitoring purpose, you have, just give me a second, how the logs are categorized. So if you have a Flex gateway logging and monitoring, there are two patterns for the, either in connected or disconnected mode. In connected mode, you have few options: configure message logging, API alerts, third-party application, checking your replica status, or your anypoint monitoring. This is possible if and only if you have connected mode. Now, configuring the message logging. What is this message logging and how it is different from your runtime log? Message log is nothing but your communication between user or the customer towards the towards the envoy proxy of the Flex gateway. So message logging is basically to access, to enable your access log. Where from you can see it is, just give me a second. I think it's already available over here. See, in any API manager that is being managed via the Flex gateway, we have a message log. Okay. If you enable on this Flex Gateway, if you really want to see the access log, you have to enable the message logging. There is a out of the box policy. If you create a message logging, then you can track the request IDs. These request IDs are not towards within your application, but your request is going into the proper MuleSoft Flex Gateway. It is reaching till the envoy or till the gateway level. So for tracking this request, you have to enable the message logging policy. Then after only you can see all your access log into the message logging. Until and unless you enable the message logging policy with the API, you won't be able to see the message log over here. What you are going to see here is basically the ID present. So till that time we were fighting with this. So if you see here in my request, whatever we talked about in the request, I am having these IDs, maybe Vizag 123. You have to pass in the header as an ID. Okay, you can do anything, but you have to mention the regex pattern. The same regex pattern has to be applied into the policy. Suppose if you send this one, then it will be updated here. See, 4 minutes ago this one got updated. I have a demo, I have a logging, just a pointer to make sure it is request or response. So this is basically called your access log. Other than this is basically for the tracking, for the initial tracking of the request, whether your request has come or your request has hit over there. Okay, so basically this is your message logging, means this is basically considering your access log. Access logs can be enabled via message logging configuration. Okay, I think, yeah, Vizag 123 has come. Good, we are good to go over that. And I think this is what we have. Other than this, the runtime logs. Now, what the runtime logs will happen? Runtime log will contain your policy violation, your, any service downtime, anything got, any issues that came up during your implementation or invocation, anything. The metrics, the anypoint metrics, the last in the API itself, when you configure the API with the Flex Gateway, you can view it in the anypoint monitoring dashboard with same parameters, with already designated parameters like request, total request, number, response time, average response time. These normal KPIs. If you really want to go for adding any new KPI, you can go for that. But these are your default: request volume, failed request, total number of 400 or 4 cross or 5 cross errors, average response time, like that. Okay, so this is how approximately your logging and monitoring works. So just make sure whenever you are having any, if you really want to see whether your request has come or reached to the Flex Gateway, enable a message logging to see your access log. But after that, within your gateway, if anything is failing up, then go for the runtime logs. I think this is much more that we had overall. And really, if you want to go and check how the logging works, actually, so we had, if you remember, in our demonstration slides, we talked about many components. Maybe you have, you can check it. We have Flex Gateway, we have Envoy, we have controller, all these things coming up. So if you spawn up anything, any Docker or something in your local, you can get all these logs in your system. Okay, you can see actually how it is being configured. For AKS or EKS, it is actually into the pod logs. So if you, because it is deployed in the pod, if you really want to see the pod logs, you have to go for the Kubernetes command by checking the pods, how the pods are working. Suppose you want to see how your ingress pod is behaving, use the kubectl command for the pod. Okay, so this is how out of the box logging and monitoring works in the Flex Gateway architecture. So I think we are almost overshooting by an hour almost. So sorry about that for all of you. So I think, yeah, I can stop it over here.
No, Sangamitra, it's a very, very excellent demo that you have given it.
Yeah, thank you so much for bearing with us. This is my first demo, so maybe we are
No,
just
I think
without time. Yeah, so
both Anusha and you have given, because demo part is very important, right?
yes.
Yes, Plex gateways are really good. Only I see like Azure gateways and AWS and Google. I think monitoring, logging, and metrics also good. Okay, but only concern is keep on installing for customers. these Plex gateways, Sangamitra, if we can get like GUI or UI framework like Cloud Hub 2.0,
Hmm.
we can install with these options and select the
Hmm.
replicas
Hmm.
for these non-Mule APIs and Plex
Yes.
gateways. That would be good, right?
Yes, yes. So first, yeah, Murli, right? Murli, right? Okay.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
Murli. So first, I mean, what I can suggest you, first you can check is whether your organization, you have suppose, obviously there is one organization where you have to install all your Flex gateway. So
yes,
inside your organization, you have multiple LOBs or business groups, right? So
yes,
based on this business group, I think Anusha has demonstrated one. Based on the business group, I would request you to select or categorize your service that suppose for business group 1 you have 50 service, business group 2 you have 30 services, like that. If you can segregate your architecture into different business groups, per business group you try to create one Flex gateway per environment. You have in each business group you have dev uat prod suppose. So in per business group, per environment, your one Flex gateway instance, when I say instance,
yeah,
instance means it is tied out to the registration. Okay, that
yes,
has to be configured. I think that would be a good one to start off with, actually, to identify how where your Flex gateway will sit. So per business group it is a best option, per business group, per environment, because business group again is having environments dev uat and prod. So then it should be a choice of your Flex gateway instance. Just make sure you control your registration whenever you are registering or you are creating the registration YAML. It is creating one Flex gateway, it is configuring one Flex gateway. Whenever you are deploying it, it is creating the replica on top of that Flex gateway. That is the idea of your design should happen. Okay.
yes. I think we are good. Maybe we can we can make it more ready-made, like Cloud Hub 2.0. Maybe later versions are some in future may come up, but right now we are pretty good. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Sangamitra.
Yes, yes. I think you are talking about some managed service option. Yes, if you
Yes,
are planning to do it, I mean, if it is coming as a managed service in Cloud Up to, yes, that
yes,
can be that. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, we can discuss that. Maybe that is not in the purview of this discussion. No, but yeah, we will definitely.
yes, yes,
There might be some issues or might be some options for that. We are not sure
yes,
about.
yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, right now Cloud Hub 2.0 is everything inbuilt with in-base controller and clustering and Kubernetes container. So just ready-made, we can need to deploy within seconds. So here Plex gateways, so we need to install these instances and clusters and
Got it.
so some kind of managed services we need to tune up. Otherwise, pretty good. I think we don't have any more questions now. Thank you so much. A very nice session,
No problem.
Sangeeta.
Thank you. Thank you so much for helping with us. Thank you, Ravi. Thanks, Ananda. And
Yeah, thanks.
Meera. Yeah.
I just spoke to a couple of people. Actually,
Thank you,
one of
Ravi.
the
Thank you,
Thank you. Yeah.
Prasanna.
Thanks, Anusha. Also. Yeah.